Hello, everybody, and welcome back to Roger's Realtime Talkshow event. Today, we are going to do our review for what we've covered in this season of the show. Today, I have Mark Edworthy with me. Otto said he may show, or he is going to show up. He's running a little late. Bob Dub's taking a break, but she's in chat if anybody wants to talk to her. So feel free to go on there and Rumble and talk to her on Rumble. Let's see. Today is basically we're just gonna go over some of the stuff that freaking we've covered and maybe have a good conversation about that. I did put a description of my talking points into the description for Rumble, and I believe I still have time to do it on YouTube too. Get that going before we end up doing anything for before we end up publishing it, I guess you could say. But with that being said, I'll welcome you back to the show, Mark. And
Thank you.
If you want to say, there you already did it. There you go. With that being said, I guess we can get with the beginning of the show. Like I said, it's a review of what we've basically gone through already. And I guess since it's just us two, we can open it up and freaking have a conversation on the things that we want to discuss. For me, the first thing that I wanted to bring up that we covered in this season was the thing about the Anarcho-Syndicalist. Whenever that happened, it kind of opened my eyes up on the whole thing about the anarchists, you know what I mean? Because even in chat, when we were having a conversation about it, before we even did this stuff, I was amazed by what Bob Dub said about anarchists having rules, you know what I mean? So like when we started this up, I wanted to cover a little bit on the first international in our episode, and then go into the second international. And it was weird to me because I started finding out that sure shit, these anarchists did have rules. They were all about unionization and stuff of that nature, and having it was all about labor, and that was something that really surprised me because I never pictured an anarchist being that way. You know what I mean?
Yeah, seems completely counterintuitive. Yeah.
Yeah, and that's one thing that I did want to discuss, especially when it comes to the unionism and the syndicalism. And if you notice, like it, with all of them, it has to do with workers and capitalist society and gaining control over the economy and things of that nature. That kind of struck me as odd right there, But
very socialist in its concept.
Actually,
yeah,
that's exactly what I was thinking about whenever I went through that, and then what else stuck out to me was their goal. It was on the labor movement, and the whole thing about it is that it consisted of trade unions and labor unions and stuff like that, like I was talking about. But it also went into things like let me see if I can remember. Economics basically, and then they also went into this thing where they freaking wanted they called the wage as slave wages. You know what I'm saying? But
Mm.
for me, when I look at that, the one thing that says, yeah, wage slavery is what they called it.
Mm.
And what gets to me is like freaking. It started making me think. So you want to take away people's wages because it's wage slavery or slave wage, whatever you want to call it. But then after you take away their wages, they're freaking doing their work for free.
I think the better term for that would be indentured servitude rather than
Yeah, you
wage
know.
slavery. Yeah. Mm.
But like you get what I'm saying though. You take away their wages, and now they're doing it for free. Now they're not. Now it's not a freaking slave wage. It's just slavery.
Well, in this case, you aren't taking away the wages per se. You're only giving them the most minimum that you can get away with. Hence the point of, well, yeah, hence why the so-called living wage is fundamentally a good idea.
Well, I mean, you got to understand though. The goal of these people was to abolish the wage system. It was to abolish it. There will be no wages.
Yeah, but that would destroy the entire capitalistic thing. And if you've got no wages, how are you going to spend money on buying the latest iPhone or your groceries or your rent, mortgage?
Now, see what I'm getting from this is things will be given to you according to your wage or your work. All the stuff that we've gone through, if you've noticed, it doesn't talk about freaking people who don't want to work. Okay, it's talking about the workers. You will work or you will get nothing. You see what I mean? You
Or
and then and
on the
then
alternative point of view, you can you only get in the minimum that you need to survive. So everybody will be eating grill and drinking nothing but water.
hopefully, I mean, if we're lucky, we'll get a freaking hobo camp.
Yeah.
I mean, you've seen societies do that shit before, and it was called frickin' Nazi regime. You know, if you're useless and you're not productive to the society, in their views, what's their alternatives? You know what I mean?
Well, it's not Nazi per se. You could say that, but any socialist, extreme socialist movements, I mean, the gulags in Russia, as an example.
Bob Dub, or Tiny Baby Kangaroo, she says, but anarchy is not socialism, is it, Mark? And then,
In the concept of the true meaning of anarchy, no. But in the concept that we are talking about, yes.
now, when you say that, you gotta elaborate a little bit more. You just can't leave it at that.
Well, we were just talking about a sort of socialist anarchy movement, a movement that will create trade unions, that will create sort of a limited form of workers' rights. So, yeah, it's enough socialism in a form.
Now, she's also saying that you should get much more than a wage. You should get money. You should get money and food and a house and all the rest. Abolishing wages is to give more, not less. So, you know, I mean that's all sounding good and everything, but that's called the free economy. You know what I mean? That's not called socialism or anarchism. It's where I freaking go out and I do an honest day's work and get an honest day's pay for what I freaking did. And I negotiate between me and the person that I'm working for the wages that I get. It's not determined what kind of wage I get. Now that's called the free economy. And that's not what I'm seeing when I read this stuff, you know what I mean? What I'm reading here is you work, you get what you frickin' deserve because of the work frickin' that you're frickin' doing. You see?
Or in the socialist movement, you get what other people deem you to deserve. There's no negotiation there. I mean, somebody else will decide on how many shirts you are allowed to own per year, how many, I don't know, how many anything, how many cups you are allowed to own.
Yeah, exactly. Or what kind of car you're allowed to drive according to your work performance and your status. You know, you got that, and you can't say that's not what they're talking about, because that's what the communists did. You know, the communists did exactly what I'm talking about. That's exactly what they're saying in those those notes. They're not.
In Orwell's 1984, isn't there a scene where Winston Smith is working for the newspaper they was working for, and he was tasked with amending all newspapers to say that chocolate rations are have been altered, and you only allowed a certain amount of chocolate per annum.
Now, see, that's where Bob Dove came in, and she said, she said distribution is the problem. Thieves must not be put in charge of distribution. You need a system that is transparent and accountable. You know, and if you look at today, and you look at the way people work today, even in our capitalistic frickin' society that's so horrible and everything, we've got frickin' thieves that are running the show, you know what I mean? Even in our socialist governments, we have thieves that are running the show, you know what I mean?
Well, you're going to get corruption no matter what system you use. Corruption is just like general sort of human sort of issue, I think.
Well, it's like everybody's talking shit about frickin' Putin, okay? Putin was a part of the Soviet Union. He was a frickin' part of their frickin'... He was big in the frickin' ranks. You know what I mean? It wasn't like he was a small-time frickin', you know, worker. He was actually up there in the ranks.
Wasn't he a KGB or officer at one point?
Yeah, I believe so. I believe he was in the KGB and the whatever other alphabet organization he was in, you know, and now all of a sudden frickin', you know, he's such a horrible person and everything, and, you know, he was a part of that frickin' socialist communist society that was going to distribute everything freely among everybody, and look at what he's doing now. You know, he's a horrible person.
I would like to get a point of view from a Russian national on this one. What the average Russian Joe blogs, or whatever the equivalent is, thinks of Putin? Something I don't hear a lot of.
For me, though, it comes back to the wage system. You know what I mean? Like, the syndicalist theory, you know, it focuses on the labor movement, and it focuses on the workers. But when it comes to the freaking people who don't want to work, like I've mentioned before, what's their solution to that? You know, how did the communists handle people who didn't freaking work? They sent them to gulags, didn't they?
Well, in some cases. But there's another point of view that I've been thinking about. in the UK, we keep on seeing junior doctors' strikes, and pushed by their own trade unions, and these junior doctors are saying, well, we aren't having enough to live on when the minimum wage is about 26,000 British pounds per annum, but the average minimum junior doctor rate is about 70,000 per annum. And these junior doctors are going on strike for forgetting that they've got patients that are in some cases suffering, in some cases potentially dying.
Mm-hmm. Now, that's another thing to keep focus on too. Is like this is stuff that was supposed to be going on in England. You know what I mean? So, like
in the UK, yeah.
So when it comes to my mind on that stuff, because England's notorious for this stuff. You guys had debtors' prison and shit like that. You know what I mean? So I could see this as lining up perfectly when it comes to a lot of things that England had done in the past. It may not have been a socialist program, but you guys still had debtors' prison. Yeah, you know
That's only been stopped within, I don't know, 150 odd years?
Yeah.
170 odd years?
Well, I'm starting to get a different perspective on anarchism and frickin' socialism, to be honest with you, because I never, like I've also noticed too, like I thought frickin' liberals, being a liberal was somewhat the same as being a socialist, but now I'm starting to realize that it's a big difference. The liberals are the ones who wanted the welfare programs. Okay, and everybody knows it doesn't matter if you're in England or you're here in the United States or in Canada. Freaking the welfare programs are horrible. Okay, they're actually a disaster because what I'm reading here is that it's not their top priority. You see what I mean? They're worried more about people working and freaking stuff of that nature. They don't really want to focus on the people who don't want to work. So their welfare programs aren't freaking the top of the priority list. You know what I mean?
Of course, we when you say don't want to work, we also have to counter those people that cannot.
It cannot work either. Yeah. See, and that also comes into what I was talking about. What are they going to do with those people? You know what I mean? What's their solution?
Sorry, I did laugh when you said solution. That brings up some terrifying thoughts.
You know what popped into your head is the same thing that freaking popped into my head when I freaking said it. Even before that, what's their solution? You know what freaking other people's solutions were to that? And I mentioned it already, you know. So it's not really pretty. One crazy man could take charge. That's all I gotta say. One crazy man could take charge with this kind of outline, and freaking we could go into a World War III because of it.
Oh, a civil war, at least minimum.
Mm-hmm. Now, that's the one thing that I wanted to talk about, and then it comes down to down here at the bottom. It says. They also were focused on not only the trade unions and the labor unions and political parties, but they were also focusing on labor unions were they were focusing on freaking class conflict. You know what I mean? And that kind of goes into where it all progressed, and it went from not only class conflict, but now we've got critical theory and shit like that, you know what I mean? And everybody's talking about transgender bathrooms and just stupid shit like that, you know what I mean?
Yeah, why would term as more the more cosmetic, generally speaking, more irrelevant points.
Yeah. And just so I can make it clear too, what I've been reading about this, and even before I found out, like, the reason why rich people couldn't understand what the socialists were talking about when it comes to class conflict was because, like, the poor people were talking about serious problems that freaking poor people had. Where freaking when a rich person heard about it and heard about how the poor people were suffering, they were thinking of like their maids and shit, you know what I mean?
Mm.
They were thinking about the people that work for them and everything. They treated their employees well, you know. Freaking if you work.
Well, again, that's more of a generalized point.
Well, I mean, that's just what most of them were back during that time period. That's what they were thinking, you know, was like, well, hold on a minute, man. My butler gets paid good, you know. I've got my maids get paid good. I freaking have a driver. He gets to drive my nice shiny car. He gets paid good. So they weren't thinking about the actual poor people living out on the streets, you know what I mean? Because they never seen it. It's kind of like how people talk about how freaking disconnected from the world Donald Trump is. Well, yeah, of course, he's lived his entire life around rich people. You know what I mean?
Yeah, most politicians do these days. After all, these days we are seeing more of a professional class of politician rather than a politician that has gone from being the average Joe on the street.
This is probably the first time freaking Donald Trump in his entire life has ever had contact with regular people. Since he's run for president and all the shit he's been through. To be honest, I mean,
I'm not sure of another one.
His father was well established before he was even old enough to vote. You know what I mean? A lot of people don't realize his father was actually involved in building the freaking Twin Towers. You know what I mean? This man had money. So that's another thing that really sticks out to me about this class conflict, that a lot of people get confused when it comes to that, especially when it comes to rich people versus poor people, because poor people understand that kind of stuff, but rich people don't understand it. They have no clue what the hell you're talking about.
Yeah, the problem that we've seen at the moment is there is too much emphasis on, I don't know, race, religion, sexuality, gender, gender. There is no examination of the sort of more class-based situations.
Well, like I don't like the term that they use, social political changes. You know what I mean? Like social political changes. Like, why the hell does it have to be social political changes? You know.
A lot of the caveats about top-down social political changes, changes that are being enforced by politicians and corporations.
And plus, it says radical social political changes. Oh, now tiny baby kangaroo is talking crazy. She says, no, if you look back on his career, you can see he always hung out with the little man. He cared. Now, come on, dude.
He's always had as far as I can see, he's always had a appeal towards the average Joe on the street. I mean, he sort of recognised that in when he was doing the Apprentice shows.
Well, he did recognize it. He did recognize it.
same with Sir Alan Sugar in the UK.
Well, the thing you have to understand though is like his stories consisted of his conversations with the cab driver. You see what I
Hmm.
mean? And things
Hmm.
of that nature. But that's fine and dandy, and he was interested in it, but that didn't entail his entire life. So what happened after he left his taxi cab drive is something that's a completely different story. You know what I mean? Of course, he enjoyed getting into a cab and having a conversation with a cab driver, but that doesn't mean that
Uh,
that's his life. You know what I mean?
yeah. As soon as he leaves the cab, he can go back to his office and speak to his executives and ignore everything else. Yeah, granted.
Yeah, freaking that's the one thing that I really get about it. It's pretty when it comes to Donald Trump. Don't get me wrong. It's good that a rich man actually does freaking, you know, that he has a fascination with the average Joe. You know what I mean? I think that's great. And but
Fun,
I'm being realistic about it though. He was rich. He was
fun,
filthy rich.
yeah. Funny enough, as you know, I created a new Mindscape the other day called Medworthy's Music Selection. One of the films I did include was the 1952, 57 Patterns with not Fonda. But this is all about corporations and understanding the mentality of that sort of class
Mm-hmm.
and understanding the how they approach the average Joe on the street.
They actually have something like that,
Mm, and then
or they did.
I'm just well, yeah. It's just a sort of it's just an interesting sort of um, elaboration of what we're talking about right tonight.
Yeah. Well, the one thing that gets me though, I was thinking about it earlier because like what do they call that? Well, like women, okay, and especially feminist women. And I'm not really saying feminist in the proper way because to me, like a feminist was Jane Fonda and people like that. But
Okay, first and second wave, rather than
you know,
the current third wave. Yeah.
but today's neo-feminist groups, they don't agree with what they used to call those classes where women would go in and they would frickin' learn etiquette and how to frickin' charm school. You know what I mean?
Okay, yeah, but that's more of a just a cultural shift where culturally everybody's more laid back nowadays, more casual. I mean, as an example, when I started in the IT industry, everybody were known, or everybody in the UK were known for wearing suits.
Mm-hmm.
And I think it was Mr. Robot the other day that was talking about the current US mentality about wearing, I don't know, Hawaiian shirts and being extremely casual in that sort of role.
Exhuming cattle, is that what he said? Did you just?
Sorry, being more casual.
Oh, casual. Okay.
Yeah, casual.
Yeah. Well, I mean, I don't wear Hawaiian shirts. Just to let you know. I mean, I've maybe worn one when got drunk and puked all over myself, but and that was about it. Like, you know. Now,
Been there, done that.
Mr. Robot's kind of crazy when it comes to all that stuff too. You know what I mean? Because like he honestly has all these stereotypes of people in the United States, and to be honest with you, if he ever came to the United States, this would be the one place where he'd fall in love and not want to leave. Just the way he acts, you know what I mean? I can already tell you he would fall in love with California. He would fit perfectly.
Yeah, I can imagine, yeah.
With
Really, yeah.
Just take him to Los Angeles and he would fall in love with LA. He'd never leave. So now after that, and we were talking about that, though, another thing that gets to me is the thing about the SDF. They and I brought it up quite a few times, and nobody seemed to want to talk about this, but like in England, they freaking had freaking socialist Sunday schools for children, okay? Now, they did these socialist Sunday schools, and by the time freaking 1916, I believe it was, Great Britain, 1916, I believe, is what the year was. Actually, 1920. Great Britain had freaking finally had its own communist party, which was the British Socialist Party. Confirmed communists. You know what I mean? And that's the one thing, or that's the two things that really stuck out to me. Like, freaking, they had freaking gone to having socialist freaking Sunday schools to freaking a full-blown communist party freaking only 1-2 years after freaking the Russian Revolution had ended. And I find that pretty profound, you know what I mean, to be honest.
Yeah.
And like, you guys had been taught socialism in your Sunday schools as a freaking alternative to denominational Sunday schools. So what the hell have they been putting in you guys' brains?
Again, I've never been to a Sunday school. As far as the religion's concerned, even though my mother used to, when she was alive, used to be fairly religious herself. I came from a fairly liberal sort of upbringing.
Well, I mean,
when it came to religion.
I know that like a lot of people today don't go to Sunday schools, but back then, a lot of people did go to Sunday schools. You see what I mean? So how did that influence people back then to where it freaking kind of trickled down to you guys? You know what I'm saying? Because you know it's going to affect you eventually.
I don't know. This is where I always argue that Britain, the UK, is mainly a cultural Christian country these days, rather than being a religious Christian country. I mean, sure, we still have a large amount of people going to church, that's all, which is being gone lower every single year. But generally speaking, more of a cultural Christian.
That's pretty interesting. I do find that interesting. I'd really like to find out more about that. Later on, I'll dig into that some, because I know with the way things are going now, with the school systems especially, you can see it in the school systems. And that had to have started somewhere too, you know what I mean? It didn't just spring up. A bunch of hippies said, you know what, I'm going to fight the system, dude. I'm going to become a freaking school teacher. That's not how shit happens, you know what I mean? It's just not.
In what sense? What do you mean? School systems? Oh, no.
You don't think that it's freaking been infiltrated by socialist groups?
Okay. You're described what I call the long march through the institutions, which are dates back to the 30s and relates to things like the Frankfurt School of Philosophy and Culture. But yeah, over the last, I don't know, 40, 50 odd years, we've seen a slow increase in, or slow movement or increase into socialist ideals within the public sector,
Yeah.
which is really now it's really quickened in the last, I don't know, 20, 25 years, 30 years.
Now, do you guys have, or do you know of any groups in your country still, like they had what they referred to as the Young Socialist League?
There are various political groups. There are organisations like Momentum in the Labour Party, which is a fairly sort of, I would say, overly left-wing sort of organisation. There are various sort of true sort of, there are various communist organisations in the UK. Various extreme socialist organisations in the UK.
No, I know. Like you guys had what they call themselves, the Fabian Society. That was the one that me and Otto and Bob Dub mentioned when we were talking about Shakespeare. And I forgot to even bring it up. I think Otto mentioned it a little bit whenever I was talking about it before. That's another one I know that was a big part of this whole socialist movement in London. And we really didn't talk much on them. That's one thing I guess we should have talked more on, was the Fabian Society.
Something I suggest that you do a bit of research on is the Labour post Blairism, new or post New Labour, and Momentum.
No.
Momentum organisation.
I really think that at this point you can call it a frickin' neo-Labour Party, to be honest with you, because from what I've read with the newer stuff, this stuff is like frickin' the Labour Party on frickin' on crack cocaine.
Well, ever since Blairism, ever since the New Labour movement has appeared and gone in reality, there's been several different groups that have been infiltrating New Labour and stretching the concept of Labour to certain degrees. This is why we see people like Keir Starmer flip-flopping on every single thing that he thinks about. 1 minute he says he wants to, I don't know, stop immigration, and the next minute he wants to increase immigration. And yeah, this is, I don't know, politics in this country is messed up at the moment.
It's confusing, but I guarantee you there's somebody that's organizing this shit, believe it or not. From the way I've been reading all this stuff, like, nothing happens in England that's freaking not organized. Okay, trust me, there's some underlying freaking outline going into place. Just what it is, you might not know, you know what I mean? But trust me, there's something going on there.
Well, I could make an argument that's just part of the more globalist sort of movements that we're seeing
Yeah,
at the moment. The
exactly.
WEF, WHO, that sort of thing.
I think Brexit really freaking shook them up. So now they're freaking
Mm,
going into overdrive to try to take and bring things back into control. That's just my
yeah.
personal take on it.
Back to what certain people believe um, would be in control because, as an example, there's no secret that Tony Blair, the Blair Foundation, is having some influence in the Labour Party, and potentially, if we do see a Labour government in July, potentially we could be sort of gone back to EU through a backdoor means.
Yeah. Well, it blew me out of the water whenever they said that you guys had to actually have an application. You had to fill out,
Mm.
your government had to fill out an application asking to leave the EU.
Yeah, but that's a signatory, or that's related to Maastricht, the Maastricht Agreement in 92, 94, 92.
Yeah.
That was a condition after Maastricht.
That's still pretty strange, though. You got to admit that is.
Or actually, I'm not sure if it's Maastricht or the Lisbon Treaty, but yeah, it's one of those two treaties anyway.
Mhm. So since we covered that, I'd like to kind of go over some of these 8 policies that we were talking about. The living wage, okay, the unemployment allowances, nationalism, and especially the thing about banking and bulk purchases of raw material, and foodstuffs. That's that's the stuff that I really wanted to kind of go over, like with this with the Independent Labor Party, which I know you guys have the Labor Party. Is the Independent Labor Party first off still active in your guys' political parties, or is it all finally just one Labor Party put together?
It's really just one party, one well, I use the word unified very loosely, but yeah, unified
Well,
party.
actually, it could be like a sect within your party because,
Yeah.
like you have the freaking libertarians, supposed libertarians here in the United States, and they're like undercover freaking Republicans. They all say, "Yeah, I'm part of the Libertarian Party," but when they run for political office, they always want to be Republicans. You know,
Mm.
so
Well, it's like my point that I mentioned last week about degrees. Just because you are a member of the Labour Party doesn't mean that you fully support all of their concepts. Just because you are a member of the Conservative Party, then you may not support all of their ideals.
I still can't put my head around your guys' whole thing about your conservative party is called the Conservative Party. That
Yeah,
blows. I'm like,
yeah, when in recent times, what do they conserve?
well, I mean, I always generalize the word conservative. You know what I mean? I never freaking like actually thought England had a political party called the Conservative Party. I just, yeah, it was really strange because last week I asked you about that, and you're like, it's called the Conservative Party. I'm like, what? I just like we've got the libertarians, and then we got the freaking we got the Republicans and shit, and then you have the Green Party, and then you have the Democrats, and then the
Mm.
liberals are in the Democratic Party supposedly. You know.
It's looking at it from a US point of view. It's interesting that how the Democrats and Republicans sort of shifted the concepts back in the 50s.
It actually goes farther back, like during the Revolutionary War, freaking the Democrats were or not the Revolutionary War, but the Civil War between the North and the South. The Democrats were banned from the North, and or disbanded, and it was over slavery, because back then the Democrats were racist. So
Okay, I've got a slight disagreement with the entire slavery point. I mean, granted, there was a set of U.S. politicians that were concerned about slavery, but the Civil War was also about unifying the country's taxation and control over both the North and South.
now,
It wasn't just solely about slavery.
the main thing with the Confederates that a lot of people overlook, other than, well, the slavery was a big deal, okay, but they also believed in the Articles of Confederation, which were it was the original Constitution. All right, and it failed. So what happened was freaking our representatives did the Constitutional Convention, which was secretive, and it was held back from the public. People didn't know about it. So these people came together to do this convention, and representatives that were there in the convention actually stood up and walked out because they refused to sign the Constitution. And the reason for that was because the Constitution was set up to where it basically catered to the rich landowners. And instead of them taking care of the problem of poor people revolting against rich people, they wanted to freaking come up with freaking regulations that made it harder. And that's what the Constitution basically is. If you know what I mean, it's harder regulations than what the Article of Confederation was. Because instead of freaking taking care of the issue of freaking, the small freaking farmers dealing with freaking the bigger plantation owners, they wanted to do the opposite. They wanted to try to squash this idea, you know what I mean? So later on down the road, whenever freaking the Civil War happened, freaking that's when the South took the freaking Articles of Confederation back and said this is going to be our government, and they abolished political parties. All right, and the North, in retaliation to all of this stuff, freaking said that the Democratic Party was abolished, and Abraham Lincoln created the Republican Party, which was the actual party that freed the slaves. Okay, so this is where it gets all gooey, because, and just so you know, what I was getting to with the anti-federalists, the ones that walked out of the Constitution, they're the ones that came back, but they agreed to sign it because of the freaking Bill of Rights.
Yeah, but when it comes to slavery, there was a push by other countries, such as England, the UK, at the time to actually reduce slavery anyway. So
no, you guys abolished slavery.
Yeah.
Well, that was because of the Napoleonic Wars.
Yeah.
Napoleonic gave Britain the leverage to do that.
Right.
The end of the Napoleonic Wars, and England was basically dictating the peace, and it was like, well, if you're going to sign this, one of the things you have to do is end slavery.
Yeah.
I guess there was some problem with Portugal, but they got it ironed out.
Yep.
Because they did not want to disturb. I mean, that's the source of all port wine. So.
And also there was after the Napoleonic Wars, there was a cultural shift. There was um, move away from agriculture to the more industrial sort of
Yeah,
situation.
yeah. And of course, if you introduce, I think introducing slave labor into an industrial capitalist sort of industrial revolution kind of setting would be that would just be disaster. And I think people saw that.
Yeah.
Mm, mm,
Talk about alienating the workers. One of the things about the slavery here in the United States, and apparently they came when they in 1787 when they did the Constitution and started working on it. They were within a few votes of banning slavery in the U.S. It was the big Southern planters. And Mark has a point that slavery for most people wasn't a huge issue. I mean, it was for some people. I mean, there had been, they're always talking about we're headed for another American Civil War, but there had been decades of paramilitary fighting over
mm,
slavery, among other things. But when it comes down to it, um, I think a lot of what actually got the governments motivated, like the government of Virginia, the governments of the southern states motivated, was the economic and political dominance of the North. And it was basically, I always saw it as kind of a failure of democracy, in that the South felt so disenfranchised, and so being overpowered by the Eastern banking interests, in New York and Boston and
New
such.
York.
And so I always point out about that war after the Civil War, we kept grinding up here. We up in the North. I'm from New York State, a Northerner. Kept grinding them into the dust with the money. If you look at American money, they've got Lincoln, the guy that crushed the South. He's on the $5 bill. You've got Grant, General Grant, the leader of the Union armies. The only Southerners on the bill are from before the Civil War: Washington, Jefferson. And that's something else I think that fueled that too. The South saw itself in a lot of ways as the originators of the United States. A lot of the founding fathers, Jefferson especially, Washington, were Southerners. In fact, the seal of the Confederacy is George Washington on a horse. And I think they felt kind of betrayed by the northern sector of the country, just basically ignoring their fine contributions, and their just that whole social aspect of it was being thrown away because the North was industrializing, and that industrialization, as we were talking about last time, brought immense economic power, something unseen in human history. The people controlling these things had immense. It must have been like the first tech billionaires suddenly popping up today. What will
mm.
they do? They were like the Elon Musks of their day.
And whenever you bring that up too, you mentioned New York. This goes all the way back to the Constitution. Okay, now with New York, they had a lot of influence and a lot of power when the Constitution of the United States was being drawn together. And this goes into what I was talking about with the Department of Justice, with the Senate. Okay, when these anti-federalists walked away from the Constitutional Convention, that upset a lot of people. It got so bad that George Mason and George Washington, who were best friends since they were little kids, never freaking spoke to one another again. Okay, that's how bad this got. And this eventually led up to what would eventually become the Civil War, because these anti-federalists were the people who were pushed down into the southern parts of the freaking country. You see, and there's a whole thing with the freaking Department of Justice where they created the Department of Justice so they could emulate the freaking Supreme Court. And the reason why they did that is because they wanted to separate the freaking individual and the state from the federal government. They wanted to make it farther apart so that freaking the federal government would have more power than what they had at the time. They did the same thing with the Senate. They created the Senate so that they could do the same exact thing, and they could have senators come to Washington with representatives so that they could do their business in Washington, D.C., instead of bringing the freaking laws back to each state and having the states decide if they wanted those laws or not. See what I mean? So
Right, more centralization.
yeah, they wanted to centralize
Yeah,
government.
Which,
but even now you
also
still got
makes sense, though,
states.
from a bureaucratic point of view. I mean, when you have to travel perhaps weeks in order to take something back to a state legislature, back then travel was restricted compared to today. I'm reminded of after the revolution in France, instead of the traditional regions, they created all the different little French departments, whatever they call them, and they were originally how long. Basically, you'd have the seat of it, and then it would basically be the radius would be how long it would take in one day to carry an order, so that every administrative center could basically give an order and it would be carried out that day. And time was a big factor for those guys. Sometimes we forget, with our instantaneous communication. I mean, when they got telegraphs, it was huge for those guys. Now we kind of laugh at that.
And you also have to keep into mind, all through this conversation, keep in mind what I said about the anti-federalists. Okay, now, those people were still there, and you were talking about disenfranchising the South, and they felt disenfranchised. Well, this goes along with what you're talking about right there. Okay, so the power is being centralized in Washington D.C., and these people freaking who felt disfranchised, actually it all started during that freaking constitutional convention, when they stood up, when they walked out of this convention because they didn't agree with what it was actually saying.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? So there was a lot of things going on there, like you said, but a lot of it it all goes right back to when that Constitution was brought up,
Well, when the Civil War breaks out, that's usually a good sign something is going wrong.
Yeah.
With how your Constitution are.
We just gave you an entire history lesson of the Civil War. Now, one thing else I wanted to talk about was the increasing the unemployment allowances and stuff like that, and the bulk purchasing. When it comes to England and stuff, and how they wanted to increase the unemployment wages, and the bulk purchasing that was being done, that right there is kind of what I think led into what we see today when it comes to freaking consumerism, and becoming a consumer. It's like today everybody treats Black Friday like it's a holiday, you know what I mean?
Right.
And
again, we are a debt-laden society. All of the rest is it is not what you own that's important. It's the amount of debt you've driven that's important.
I think I've mentioned that before too, didn't I? Like I actually did do some research into debt, and like the weird part about it is, and a lot of people hate hearing this, but the more debt people like me and you are in, the better off our government is. Okay.
Oh, yeah.
You know what I mean?
Our entire credit score system's based on debt. The more debt that somebody can rack up, as long as they can presumably pay it, the better their credit score is.
Well, even other countries, like the countries that we're in debt to, which, believe it or not, the United States is in debt to other countries. Okay, we don't own like all the freaking bills and shit that every other country has. Like, we owe other countries money, and the more in debt we are, the freaking more benefits these countries give us. They say, since you owe us so much money, here's what we'll do: we'll freaking let you hold off on making all of these payments, but you have to sell our cars in your country. And then they not only want us to sell their country in our country, but then they want to do it at a lower rate so that it'll help us out. So all of a sudden we're buying German cars and we're selling them to the general public. You know what I mean? And we're doing it at a discount price. Everybody's driving around in a Yamaha, or riding around on a Yamaha or a Suzuki, or got that.
But arguably that's aiding consumer choice and innovation and the choice of a person to either buy a Suzuki or a BMW or a Tesla.
Well, you understand though, the government has to negotiate before you're allowed to buy from those governments. Like you don't have the right to frickin' go and just say, look, man, I want to buy this car. If this car is in a country that doesn't, go and try to buy a vehicle from Iran and see how close you get. It's not going to happen.
What would an Iranian car?
I mean, do you even know what kind of car frickin' they sell in Iran?
They probably use.
Iran have a car industry.
No, I mean, seriously, do you even know what kind of cars they sell in Iran? I don't. I have no clue.
Leftover cars from when they were like an American satellite back in the 70s.
Yeah.
Or maybe like old former Soviet vehicles or something. I don't know. They must get cars. I mean, they need cars to have a modern country, so they must either get them from China or Russia or something. I never looked into that. That's an interesting. We should do a show about that. Where do countries get their cars?
Mm-hmm. Or what kind of cars are being produced in these countries that we're not allowed to trade with?
Well, I don't know. Some of these cars you might not want to drive. I mean, they could very well be designed for like different, have a different driving system, different grades of gasoline, different pollution requirements and stuff. So,
interestingly, I've been following a lot of the EV movement, the electronic vehicle movement, and the importation of lower grade Chinese automobiles to the West, and seeing sort of things like massive lithium battery fires and stuff.
Interesting.
Something else. Now, this and other thing too that I did want to bring up is freaking back then even they were talking about raising to meeting the cost for the national income. They were talking about allowing taxing the higher income earners. And the last time we were talking about it, I said, did that sound familiar to you? You know what I mean? Because that's what they're doing now, especially here in the United States. They think that their big answer to freaking all of the economy is to freaking tax the rich more. Because, of course,
and the only problem with this is if the rich get taxed too much, they would just disappear to another country with a low tax system.
Yeah. Off to Switzerland or wherever, Brazil, Portugal.
Well, I mean, even
and this is the situation that could get worse if we ever bring in UBI. Because obviously that money has to come from somewhere. If let's say you're earning £70,000 and you are getting taxed on 50%, then why not just disappear to another country?
Yeah.
And understand too, this stuff was being talked about in 1924 over there in England.
Well, that's creeping socialism, But that's how I'm sure it was seen by. I mean, there was a series of taxes passed, and I don't know the details exactly, but I do know that there was a point where between a lot of it had to do with death duties, I guess, and just an increase in tax where many people were impoverished who had depended upon the old traditional, wealth of either having land or just money in the bank. The money in the bank gets taxed away, the value of the land drops, and when you're up that proverbial creek, unfortunately.
I find that it's strange that over 100, well, it's exactly 100 years later, freaking, they're still talking about the same thing about, we need to tax the rich more money because freaking they're not,
Well, it's like, what are you taxing? I mean, tax the rich. That sounds good, but this is something I know. This guy, he's an engineer, and he has a small business, and they engineer high precision parts, and using power tools, lathes, mills, that sort of thing. Well, he had two guys that used to work for him. So here's two guys employed in a skilled trade. 1 year, one of the guys cuts his finger, goes to the emergency room. It's not a bad cut, not even a stitch, just needed to be cleaned up, and they put a Band-Aid on it or something like that. But he reports it because it happened at work, yada, yada, goes to the thing. Well, the very next year, my friends, we have disability insurance in the state, in which basically the state mandates that the employer has to provide own an insurance policy for injuries, but they get the policy through the state. It's very complex and needlessly so.
Mm-hmm.
But long story short, when it came time to do all of his paperwork for his business the next year, he found that because of that injury, his fees for having this insurance was increased by $20,000. As a result, he had to fire both employees because he could not afford to have. So that little thing, which was supposed to protect the workers, eliminated two good-paying jobs, for people doing a professional job. I mean, to be fair, they weren't working full-time, but still, they were working in their field.
Yep.
And it was the direct intervention of the state that caused and I saw this whole thing happening in front of me, and I was like, what a lesson,
Yeah.
What a lesson.
Then that brings me up to something else that I've been noticing too. Like, we have a big thing that is being discussed around here about workman's comp. And this is about the people who own companies, okay? And they're not big freaking company owners, they're small businesses. And the thing that's hard with them is the fact that they have to freaking pay for workman's comp. Alright, and this is even if they don't have anybody who has had accidents or nothing, they still have to pay for it, and it's so freaking overwhelming the amount of money these people want them to pay to freaking have workman's compensation that they can't hire people. They just can't hire them. And then when they have workman's comp, if it doesn't matter if they have injuries on the job or not, freaking they still have to have it. It's mandatory.
But on the opposite side of that argument, you've got to, as a worker, as an employee, you want some sort of protections, just in case you cut off your arm or something.
Oh yeah.
But these companies are able to freaking force you to pay by the month, every freaking month, or by the year, or annually,
Well, it seems very unfair to me that, I mean, if you're a government and you say everyone should have this protection, have the health care and be protected from injuries if they get injured and they lose their livelihood, right? That makes sense. But then they turn around and they throw it all on the employer, which again, with a big corporation is not such a bad idea, but with a small struggling business. So and just when I've seen in New York State, just the amount of rigmarole you go through, and it's all done through insurance companies. Insurance companies are very, very powerful in New York State. They're one of the few things that really makes a lot of money because the state mandates all this different insurance. But I mean, it seems to me, why doesn't the state just directly do this? Rather than having all these different layers of this and that, you should be able to. I mean, if you're going to have some sort of a safety net for workers, and it's going to be state mandated, and why is the state mandating it? Why doesn't the state just take care of it themselves? And that way, the employer wouldn't have to worry about it, and the worker wouldn't have to worry about it. And if the worker got injured, then the state would step in. I don't know. That just seems to me would be a lot easier. It would remove about 90% of the paperwork, and the result would be the same thing.
Yeah.
As you're aware, I subscribe of Lewis Osman, the US regulatory affairs thing, and it was operating up to I think a year and a half ago in New York, and he demonstrated on quite a few figures that New York's state's bureaucracy is just overly top-heavy and in a lot of cases incompetent.
I've actually been saying that about New York. New York, it's like I said, they're very influential. A lot of people like to say freaking all the power is in Washington D.C. and it's not. Okay, it's in New York. John J. McCloy was the worst mistake that ever happened to freaking the United States. And if anybody has never heard who John J. McCloy is, he's the one who formed the Department of Justice. Okay? And from that point on, all the way up to now, freaking New York has come up with these radical freaking ideas about regulation. They're all about regulation. They want to regulate everything, freaking to housing, to freaking medical, to freaking jobs, everything.
They're trying to do away with wood heat or gas heat. Natural gas. They want everyone to be electric, which is insane. We have power outage. We had a power outage here a few years ago because of snowstorms. There were parts of the state that had no electricity for 30 days. You can't rely on electric heat in this place.
Yeah.
Yeah, we're seeing the same movement in Europe at the moment, in the UK and various parts of the EU. Trying the concept of outlawing sort of wood burners as an example.
And, they like to blame it on freaking the green earther shit, you know what I mean? I'm sorry, dude, but freaking... I'm getting tired of hearing people say freaking when cows fart, freaking it's causing problems with the environment. You know what I mean? Freaking cows have been farting for freaking a long time. So is pigs. And now they're trying to say freaking, oh, you shouldn't be burning wood. What's wrong with having a freaking campfire in your backyard or freaking burning freaking refuge in your yard instead of freaking having the city come and haul it off for you?
Well, most of the, like where I live, it's upstate and it's very different from downstate. And generally, most of the restrictions on burning around here have to do with we have times when you can't burn anything because they're fire hazards. They're worried about fire. So they have seasonal burn bans. But other than that, but now they're trying to try to use CO2 as an excuse. I do not regard CO2 as a pollutant or a problem. So the way I look at it, their premise is flawed, and therefore every single one of their arguments are to be discounted and ignored.
I agree with you. And that's the reason why I was alluding to all that is because, like you said, and that's why I freaking said it, you know what I mean? I know where that shit's coming from. They're trying to freaking... It's these crazy freaking environmentalists that are coming out with straight, bold-faced lies.
It has to do, too, with transfer of power. I mean, I read an article not long ago where this guy was talking about, he was at this big international climate thing, and he's like, all of the so-called greenhouse gas reduction was for the UK and for the US and for Canada, but for the third world, for China, for India, they're putting hundreds of coal power plants online. Hundreds of them. They don't have the kind of environmental protection laws that we have here in the West. So you've seen pictures of these are yeah, soft brown coal, that's perfect. We've got lots of it and it's cheap. Plus they're going more and more nuclear, which really, to my mind, is if you really want to worry about CO2, then you can't go wrong with nuclear. I think that's what they're using now to provide power for the AI. That's something I saw. Something they're going to have dedicated.
In some cases, again, this goes back to the sort of being person that was growing up in the 80s. This goes back to the sort of CND movement in the UK, where nuclear has always been thought of as being a sort of dangerous sort of, even though technology has been improved, especially since the Japanese issue back in the 90s, 2000s, whatever it was. Also, there's the old joke that in the UK that the Green Party are the party of the watermelons, i.e. green on the outside, red in the centre.
I don't know. Well, your red though is our blue, I believe, right? So.
Yeah, well, red as in communism.
Yeah,
as in socialism. Yeah.
Yeah. And it's a known fact here with our Green Party. Like, they don't deny the fact that they're socialists. Like, they'll point blank tell you they're socialists. So, like, that's.
There used to be a saying about, I might have mentioned it before, the Nazi color was brown. And they talked about people who were beefsteak Nazis, brown on the outside, pink or red on the inside. And what's interesting is a lot of people that were members of the National Socialist Party in Germany had previously been German communists. There was an attempt to appeal to the communists, and I think that was one of the reasons they used the word socialism as part of their platform, part of their name. But they really were, again, they were reaching for a third position. They were trying to be neither left nor right. And I think ultimately, though, they actually, there was a very interesting idea about that. The communists, when they approached the German workers, were saying to them, "You proletarians," which is not a nice word, really. It just means all you can do is make more people, right? So it's like, "You proletarians, look at how they're crushing you underfoot. You've got to destroy all those fuckers." Basically, class war. Whereas the Nazis were like, "Look at you proletarians. You're just as good as these other people, and you deserve the same respect." And in the Nazi Party, they talked about workers of hand and mind. So if you were like a newspaper editor or journalist or a chemist or something, you were considered to be just as good and just as bad, for that matter, as a guy that's like working in a foundry or doing a carpenter or something like that. So when they came, they were all seen as German workers, and it was basically something that appealed to them. Like, we're bringing you up, not we're tearing these guys down, kind of deal.
But see, that also goes back to what you were saying earlier too, though. Like, that developed over time. Like, you've also got to take the Volk into consideration. Like, they incorporated the Volk Society into their freaking Nazi.
Oh, yeah, there were a lot of strands. The Volkssturm, actually the Volkssturm came later, but the Stahlhelm veterans organizations, these are basically militias. I mean, again, there was, we cannot remember this part, but talking about paramilitary action before the American Civil War, there was a lot of paramilitary action going on in Germany before they settled down into the Third Reich. I mean, Bavaria was a Soviet Socialist Republic for a while. That's how bad it got. And so, yeah, there were a lot of different groups that had to, for the Nazis to take power, they had to have a kind of a, I guess, coalition politics, you'd call it. And that was one of the reasons why Hitler's rule was actually very unstable. I mean, it looks really stable in retrospect, but Hitler always felt insecure as hell. He was always worried about all the different factions. And like I said, I think if like World War II hadn't happened, or if Germany had won, I still think the Nazi state, from what I've seen of it, probably would have flown apart, or I don't think it was very stable. I don't think it would have lasted as long as Franco's did, for example, or Mussolini's.
Now, Mussolini, though, his ideas were a lot more radical. Like, he wanted these constitutional governments to take their constitution and throw it out the door and just basically do a freaking duplicate of what the Italian Constitution was. You see what I mean?
Oh, yeah, yeah. But Mussolini, he was in power a very long time, and he really was. I mean, he made a lot of wacky speeches, and I've read his article on fascism in the Encyclopedia Italiana, which I recommend to anyone who'd be interested in Mussolini. But really, you know, when I think of it, he really, by the time he got involved with Hitler, you know, he was a settled down statesman. He was pretty much respected and accepted by everybody in Europe. He'd had you know, those foreign adventures in Ethiopia, which weren't such, I don't think, a good idea, but you know, he seems to think they were a good idea. But anyway, I mean, he was pretty much settled down. His government was very stable. I mean, if World War II would never have happened, there'd be a, you know, they'd still have the king in Italy, and there'd still be probably a fascist prime minister. Because really, that's all it was he basically retained the Italian government. They'd had the king all through it. It was still like the Royal Navy or whatever they called it. And one imagines Mosley had the same idea as happening in Britain, which never, you know, they threw him right in jail. But yeah, so yeah, these guys were really stable, but Hitler was really the unstable one. He was really the guy. You know, you can look at all the other fascist leaders. You know, Franco, yeah, I got Spain. You know, I got Italy, and here comes Italy. Jesus, fuck, you're invading Czechoslovakia. What the hell do you think you're doing? Oh my God, now Russia? Jesus, fuck. Now you got the Brits bombing us? Oh my God. Was out of control. This guy was out of control.
Illuminati finally showed up for our chat. One of them, he said, "What's that?" I don't know if you guys
interesting point about Germany's World War II. If it wasn't for Germany invading Poland, the Brits may never actually join World War II. And I always argue that Germany's biggest mistake was the destruction of the the Russian-German pact in 1941. The Wissensdorf, yeah, something, yeah, that's one.
Now, with England, you got to also take into consideration Churchill. Okay, Churchill made a really, really profound speech at the end of World War II, which a lot of people don't catch. And he said it didn't matter if it was Adolf Hitler who was in power or another German, another German. That war was bound to happen. Okay, so there was a lot of things that were going on there, and a lot of what happened in World War II actually involved a lot of things that were unresolved in World War I that a lot of people don't realize. You know what I'm saying? There was a lot of bad blood that was going on there, and it wasn't just Germany that was involved or the Weimar Republic. Okay, it was also things that the French did, the things that England did. They were applying force on the German people and causing them to freaking live basically in depression, below poverty, believe it or not, because freaking they wanted reparations from the First World War. And like France literally went in and occupied German territory and forced them to freaking work so that they could get their money. And you don't hear about that in history books. See?
Arguably, World War One was due to a sort of I don't know how much say guilt complex. Disgruntled Germany, or by that time a unified Germany, disgruntled unified Germany for what France did during the Napoleonic Wars.
Yeah, and see, Germany always they wanted the
reunify. During the Napoleonic Wars, Germany wasn't a unified country. It was only unified in 1872, I think.
Right. I think what Napoleon put together, the Confederation of the Rhine, but up to before that, it was like 800 or something. Nobody could tell how many countries. I had a history professor once who said nobody knows because, like, you would get married and suddenly it'd be one country, and then you'd have a a kid, and then you'd give him part of your country, so you'd have 2 countries there, and each one was sovereign. But there were literally hundreds of little countries, and I think Confederacy of the Rhine was what, like 100 or something. There was a lot, but
something like that. Yeah.
And
but
the one thing that Hitler wanted that he couldn't have was the reunification of Hungary and Germany. That was the one thing he wanted, and Hungary didn't even want to be reunified. That's why they assassinated.
Are you more talking about the
Austria?
Austria, yeah.
Hungary,
Austria.
In
Austria.
World War I.
It was Austria. Did you hear that, Mark?
Yeah.
It was Austria.
Yeah.
But that's what it was. They wanted to reunify it, and the country of Austria, Hungary, whatever they didn't want that. Okay. And that's why Adolf Hitler actually had freaking the SS in that country assassinate him. He was going to go to Mussolini.
Well,
he was going to go to Mussolini and freaking make an arrangement with freaking Italy, as long as freaking he didn't have to freaking unify with Germany. So
there is no actual proof of there's no actual proof of Germany's involvement in the assassination.
But yeah.
As far as I'm aware.
Yeah. Even though it was the SS in that country that committed the freaking crime, dude. Like.
It wouldn't be the SS, because the SS would be created a lot later.
Freaking, it was freaking the SS, dude. They even said it. They had a political movement
SS is a World War II thing. We're talking about the move of his name in World War I. The SS didn't even exist up until 1920, after the removal of the brown shirts.
Now, actually, not to change the subject too much, but getting back to what Mark was saying about, you really thought that the non-aggression pact between the Soviets, Germans, that they signed, what was it, 41?
Yeah, it was meant to last 10 years.
Yeah, the pact
lasted a year with that.
You really think that was a mistake on Germany's part?
Yeah. After all, Napoleon demonstrated that you shouldn't go into Russia, because that will create a long drawn-out war where people just froze to death. You cannot sustain a long drawn-out war against Russia using ground troops, because of the river conditions.
There's
right.
There's the old theory. There is the old theory.
Okay.
Right, there is the old theory about always having wars in the summer and spring.
Right.
But you also have to take into consideration there was a reason why they had that pact in the first place. Now, during the time that or just before the war, they were not allowed to build military equipment. Germany was restricted. They could not do it. So instead, what they did is they created that pact, and they started building their military weapons in Russia, okay, under freaking the guys, you know what I mean? People didn't know this.
Oh yeah, they were cooperating with the Soviets, before
so that they could do that, so they could build that military, and then whenever they decided to freaking go into action, that's when they decided to freaking break ties with them. Poland, there's a reason why freaking Poland was the first country that the Nazis invaded. Okay, Poland and Germany never had a good relationship. Never.
Well, he kind of annexed the Sudetenland before that, I thought. But no, about the Russian. No, I misunderstood. I thought you were saying that the pact itself was a mistake.
No, I'm saying the breaking of the pact.
Breaking the pact. Yeah.
As far as Germany was concerned.
I see. Well, because my impression was that the main reason the Germans got involved in the pact, I mean, aside to give them a free hand in the West, was that they were really just worried about, like you're saying, being able to deal with any sort of a war of attrition in the East. But I guess what I've come across, again, I'm no complete expert on this, but I've always been interested in this period in history, and I think that the thinking by the Germans was that Stalin was getting ready to attack them, and they really felt that they also felt that Stalin was making threatening moves. I mean, this is of course you'll always find an excuse if you want to attack someone, but I think that they didn't think the pact was worth the paper it was printed on, and that neither of these were particularly trustworthy governments, really. So when it comes to like agreements, so I think it was like the two guys facing off to do a duel. You know, they stand back to back, and they're going to count to 10 and turn, but they're going to turn and fire before 10. So you're trying to second guess the other guy. So I'm half thinking that Hitler figured Stalin was going to, you know, jump the gun anyway, so he's trying to jump the gun on Stalin. But
the Nazis were also sending out attacks against the communist way before World War II during the Weimar.
Even though they cooperated a little sometimes, the Nazis and commies are like cats and dogs, especially at that time. They were having, they very, ideologically negative and positive, just sparks flying.
They did not like one another. I know that.
Well, Putin go on about Nazis. You're going to you're talking about we will denazify this. Really, I mean, and Putin has also said that Russia, the Soviet Union, was Russia, and with the implication that Russia is a continuation of the Soviet Union. So yeah, though there's that still, and I think that goes down to German versus Russian too. There's a lot of the Teutonic Knights versus the Slavs. You've seen that great silent film, Alexander Nevsky. That's a great film. Captures that whole, really cultural struggle that you've got going on there.
Okay, so now that we've done all that, let's get this last part that I want to talk about too, and see what you guys think about it. Now, this is about the banking system in England. Back then, they wanted the nationalization of bankings, and what they wanted after that was they wanted this government to do a review on the banking systems and basically go in and turn or transfer the Bank of England into public control. You know what I mean? And they wanted to revise the operation of the Bank Acts and ensure that the control of credits is exercised in the national interest and not in the interest of the powerful financial groups. So basically, they wanted all the banks to be a state-run facility. You know what I mean? And whenever I look at that, what it reminds me of, especially with the whole thing about the gold, whenever we were discussing that, you know what I mean? The checks, and they wanted to get rid of the gold reserves. And here in the United States, we had that same thing happen. And it seems odd that happened right around this time period, because they did it in England and it happened here, and then all of a sudden we get the Federal Reserve. You know what I mean?
Right.
So that's something that really sticks out to me. I mean, it's like freaking, and look at how banking is done today. I mean, even though they don't directly say that it's state ran, it's still state ran.
I'm going to slightly disagree with that point. First of all, you're talking about the FDR movement of removing gold, and we saw a similar policy during in the UK when Gordon Brown was the exchequer under the Blair government. I think it was it was before 2000, actually it could have been 2001 or 2002, where a lot of UK gold reserves were sold off to countries like China at a fraction of their actual market value. Arguably, we've got the opposite issue at the moment, where we're seeing the banking companies, or the Bank of England, the Federal Reserve in the US, having too much power over price of money and over distribution of money.
Now, exactly when did you guys get taken off of the gold standard, though? See, that's what's really important. That's what's really important. You know, I mean, like 2000 is nothing. Like, when did they take you off the golden standard? The gold standard for us was well, back during that was the whole time with freaking
FDR,
FDR,
in the 50s, yeah.
So, you know, and that's what stuck out to me whenever they were talking about that, and they were talking about the nationalization of banking and changing the economic policy to where labor would have frickin' labor pools where instead of frickin' paying people the way we're used to doing it today, you would have labor pools that they would frickin' put the money into the pot, and that's how frickin' these people would get paid.
And also there's the point of just the money creation system, making money out of thin air. After all, for the UK and US, we've seen a lot of quantitative easing since 2007. And I think, as far as Japan is concerned, they've had quantitative easing for what must be at least 30 odd years now.
You said quantitative easing?
Easing, yeah, the creation of money, just the printing of money.
Yeah, that's basically what we call fiat. Make believe money that's not really.
Yeah.
That has absolutely no value, but we think it does.
Well, it has. If you think it does, then it has a value, though.
Right.
You know,
It's a sort of more psychological thing. I believe that's a £10 note. Yeah.
It is delicate and yet strong. I think of it as a soap bubble made of steel.
I love that.
I always like that. I posted on my timeline. There's a wonderful scene from the movie Cartoon. I don't know if you gentlemen have seen that. Great movie with Charlton Heston. Mm-hmm. And it's interesting because the Mahdists, the followers of the Mahdi, are basically ISIS. I mean, it's the same. I believe it's the same ideology, but so they, you know, they've been around for a long time. But there's this great scene at the very end of the film where I always say it's a wonderful example of moral authority. He just stands at the top of the staircase, and all the tribesmen are there. They got their spears and their guns, and he shows up, and they just all fall silent just by his presence, and he just walks slowly down the stairs, and they all back off until, of course, the moment is broken and someone sticks a spear in them. That's what I mean. It's very delicate. It's very strong, but very delicate. And, fiat currency is sort of like that. It can do wonders to keep an economy in motion, because really, on a certain level, as long as the money keeps moving around, there's prosperity. It's basically a ticket to move commodities around. But it's like running down a hill. If you run too fast or too far, you suddenly become too aware of what you're doing, you'll trip and fall, and it'll become a tumble, and you might wind up with a broken neck at the bottom, like they were doing in Weimar Germany with a wheelbarrow full of money.
Mm-hmm. Exactly. And
but also
that goes back to,
it also raises the
that goes back to the consumerism part about consume. You see what I mean? And
Mm.
that's something that's the only thing I wanted to mention right there. Like, and they're saying this shit in 1924, man.
Oh yeah, they were very aware. They were very frightened of oversupply, underconsumption. That was seen as, like I say, I have a feeling they thought that could easily become as much of a cycle as a prosperity cycle. So, yeah, they were always fearful of their oversupply and underconsumption.
And
Our,
like relate that to today too, though. Like now it's become what they're thinking
oh
of as
yeah,
a solution has become our problem.
oh yeah, that's how it always works.
Yeah.
Oh.
Just looking at this from a different point of view, this is why I'm so into the sort of right to repair movement. We see in the computer phone industry, companies like Apple is producing the latest, newest phones, as an example, and I'm expecting you to get the latest this year's thing, besides the concept of actually repairing your old phones or making do with your old devices. And yeah, it's the sort of bizarre sort of consumerism.
That's that's the thing I have an issue about with the consumerism stuff, because like freaking it is becoming a problem, you know, and it's like everybody thinks that consume is the best way to do things, and they're saying, oh, you can't have a good Christmas if you don't go out and spend money because it's going to hurt the economy. Yeah, yeah. I mean, they're literally selling that bullshit to the freaking public. Like, oh, you need to help the economy. Go out and buy shit for Christmas.
It does help the economy, but I think it comes down to as well. I mean, this has been pushed for a long time. Somewhere I've got a Christmas album by I forget, I think it was Spike Milligan, but like these comedians, and that was the whole point of the album. And this was like from the early '60s about them just pushing the consumerism. People are aware of this, and for like I mean, and here we are, all of us rejecting that consumerism, but at the same time. It is sort of a symptom of the sort of society that we've set up and developed. And again, I don't think it's necessary to posit any sort of a conspiracy. I have a little saying: cupidity and stupidity do more than conspiracy to drive the course of human history. And
Yeah.
as they discover things such as the stupider you make a TV show, the more people will watch it. And the more people that watch your TV show that see your ad will buy your stuff, and therefore you can sell ads on stupid TV shows for a lot of money. Combined with the fact that TV has an amazing influence on the human mind, well, again, this is what leads to stuff like this. And one of the messages pushed is consumerism. Don't you want a new car? Don't you want this? It's that whole idea of you consume the symbol and you take on its power. This is in Buddhism, we call this a becoming. It's simply a little fantasy we go into, and when we see that glass of beer or that hat or that particular car, we're no longer looking at that. We're looking at all of the things that have been suggested to us by the adverts and by the way people regard this. The other people that have seen the adverts, they think it'd be really cool to have a BMW too.
Mm-hmm.
So you're not only impressed with yourself, but you're impressing the people that are also impressed with those commercials. And so again,
it's not only that, but in the UK, there's this expression of keeping up with the Joneses.
Yes.
So keeping up with your next door neighbour. Your next door neighbour's bought this new car, therefore you've got to keep up with appearances.
No, keep it in focus here too. We're talking about things that are being mentioned about socialism in England. Okay, this has nothing to do with frickin' capitalism. It has nothing to do. This has to do, everything we've just been discussing has to do with socialism. Okay? And but if you talk to people about this stuff, they don't relate that to socialism. But that's exactly what it is. This is socialism that's taking place, okay? Black Friday. consume, freaking gotta have more, keeping up with the freaking Benjamins or the Joneses, you know what I mean?
Benjamins, though, that's good too. I like that.
Yeah.
You know,
Igor, Mr. Smith, Mr. Floyd.
all of this
So
is socialism.
One thing that I find interesting is things like Black Friday has always been a US concept. It wasn't up to, I don't know, 25 years, 30 odd years ago that this sort of idea didn't actually come into the UK. Yeah.
We had
That's
it.
a
We had
thing.
it, but it wasn't big until just recently. Like, I
Part
mean,
of it, it's a spectacle. People do it because it's like pro football, only you get to be part of it. I mean, part of it is it's a comment on itself at this point. You know, I'm not saying the entire phenomenon is media driven, but really, if you really want to get a deal on something, I mean, this is like the day after Thanksgiving. It started when there were a few very high end products that were not going to be available. You know, I'm thinking back to the first time I noticed this stuff like was the Sony Walkman cassette player. I don't know if anyone here is old enough to remember those.
yeah, I do.
Yeah, definitely.
Object, you couldn't get one for love or money. I knew people that drove like 150 miles to be able to buy a Walkman and come back and have it before anyone else had it. And people would wait in line, and if it was so there was a certain amount of that. But really, I see those Black Friday videos, and those people are going there knowing what's going to happen. They're going there; it's like a giant mosh pit, you know.
Yeah. Yeah.
And I mean, sane people don't go out to that; they just watch it, and then they all point fingers and look at those guys. But again, it's almost like it has as much cachet as pro football, only you get to be in it. And you know, I really think that
Also,
they really enjoy it. I think.
yes, sir. Also, being a bit controversial, a lot of people don't actually know how to buy. As an example, when I'm looking for new technology for my own use, I will always look at wholesalers. I will always look at new old stock vendors. I'm very rarely actually buy equipment from so-called high street chains. And a lot of people would just see, this high street chain is sending this latest TV, therefore that is what the TV must be worth. And there's this entire argument of what something is worth compared to the value of that piece of equipment.
Yeah. And see, you talking about like the good old days? Do you both of you guys remember how much you had to pay for a brand new VCR when they first came out?
Oh yeah, VCRs, those were amazing, and everybody was worried.
I don't know what my parents did.
A VCR cost $200 freaking bucks, and back then, freaking 200. That was quite a bit of money back then.
I rented a half a house for $150 a month.
Right, exactly.
So it would cost more than a month's rent.
On minimum wage, when I was 16, I freaking made $600 a month.
That's pretty good money back then.
What was it?
Interestingly, I was reading a report not that long ago saying that it's only just been extremely recently, within the last 5-6 years, that nobody's manufacturing VCRs anymore.
Oh, wow.
Good.
Well, we have that one place that they've got this advertisement on TV where freaking they can make them for you, but you have to call them up and they'll
it's more specialist niche.
Right.
Sort of more,
I forgot the name of them.
Cottage industry.
And
It's
then
like dystopian cyberpunk novel. They're the old VCR maker down in the village.
I've been thinking about it, to be honest
Give me a
with you.
beat much any day.
I've been thinking about it after I found out how VCRs are, like, a lot of people. We were talking about this on Tech Talk the other night, but like VCR tapes, the reason why they wanted to phase them out was because they can't freaking be monitored on the internet. Like the style of the tape is freaking doesn't have a code on it that can be picked up by freaking streaming, so they can't get you for copyright infringement.
Ah.
So I can take a
Also,
VCR
a
and
little bit
record.
on a very niche market that I remember back in the early to mid-90s was the use of VCRs as a data storage mechanism for things like backups.
Yeah.
Ah.
And see, like I can
Again, very niche.
I can plug a VCR in, record a freaking TV show, take that VCR tape, convert it to freaking video, and they can't track it. It's a clean video.
Huh.
That's crazy, isn't it?
I don't know. I am not a tech guy.
It's weird how that is, but I actually found that out.
I do remember VHS and Betamax, and I remember that Betamax was actually the superior system, but they wouldn't license it. They kept it proprietary, and so as a result, it never really got built very much.
Well, I think I covered pretty much everything on there. The gold reserve thing is another thing. I'm pretty shifty about that, or I have my opinions on that, which goes further, but this isn't about conspiracy theories. I'm trying to keep it clean, you know what I mean?
We should base our currency on uranium, and that way people would spend it very quickly. I'm sure they would keep the
I was
economy.
going to say conspiracy theories or conspiracy facts.
Well, even if we tried to frickin' say that it was a conspiracy fact, they would still call it a conspiracy theory, Mark.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's
Yeah.
more than.
You know what I mean? It's like, so I figured since I don't want to frickin' like be one of those guys that frickin' does a stream that's bad mouthing and trashing frickin' people so that we can frickin' get popularity, we'd make it as cool and informative as well as frickin' entertaining as possible. You know what I mean?
Classy.
Yeah, we show a little class. You know what I mean?
Yeah. Classy.
We're not here to talk about how horrible frickin' Biden and Donald Trump are. We're here to frickin' talk about the economy and cool stuff like that, because you know why? We're classy. We got taste.
That's right.
What's the old? There's another British saying. Today's newspapers, tomorrow's chip paper.
Exactly.
French fries paper in the US. Yeah.
And I do want to bring one thing up too. Last year we were talking about Grisham Towers, okay? And I want to bring that up again. And there's a reason why I want to bring it up. It's because since we started doing this about England and talking about the Labour Party, it's made things a lot more clearer in my head, you know what I mean? Like their priorities when it comes to being liberal versus being freaking socialist. You know what I mean? And I'm starting to see now that, like, being freaking like the welfare state when we were talking about earlier, it doesn't hold as high of a priority to freaking socialists as what it would for a liberal. You know what I mean? Even though
sure.
even though your Liberal Party got incorporated into the Labour Party, don't get me wrong, but there's a big difference between them.
Liberal Democrats are still at the so-called third party in this country.
Yeah, right. Yeah, right. I
during the what was it what's it Cameron's
see
government
you're telling me the Liberal Party is still going.
yeah Liberal Democrats
You have it.
during Cameron's yesterday we were talking about I mentioned Nick
Hold up.
yesterday I mentioned Nick Clegg.
Hold up. This is the first time I've heard this. You're telling me that England has the Democratic Party.
The Liberal Democratic Party,
Oh wow.
Liberal.
which is really a joke of a party. But yeah,
That's news to me.
yeah, I think it actually was last thing we were talking about. I mentioned Nick Clegg, and Nick Clegg was the leader of Liberal Democrats at the time, and there was the coalition for Conservatives to stay to hold power in Cameron's time. There was the coalition between Liberal Democrats and the Conservatives.
Oh wow. That's weird. That right. Well, we're gonna have to go into the conservatives in your country too, because like that sounds like a really interesting thing. I mean, I think a lot of people get a misconception of what conservative is here in the United States compared to England and Canada. Canada is completely weird. Like their conservatives actually go to frickin' gay pride parades and shit. You know what I mean? Where here in the United States, you're not going to see a conservative going to a gay pride parade. It's not going to happen.
I don't know. It's like I pointed out the other day. It's like kissing the baby sort of routine.
Yeah.
You've got to be seen
Mhm.
for the reasons of vote.
Now, I could be wrong actually, because I was just joking around last week, you know. But there is gay conservatives, so there could be.
It's actually a libertarian issue for some people, because it's like, you know, and the libertarian aspect is, who really cares what you do in your own bedroom? I don't really even want to know. But it's like, I certainly don't get worked up about it. It's not gonna affect if I decide to hire you or not for a job, or, you know, provide you with civil rights. I don't.
These days they will, but again, there's been a real sort of culture shift over the last 30 odd years, where things like sexuality
Oh yeah. The
gender has been moved into the public space.
Yeah, it's become a political thing, which I don't care for. I think I like privacy.
I agree.
There's a certain getting back to that classy thing. You know, dancing around naked and engaging in sex in the street is not what I'd call class.
Right. Even though it would be fun, and I would recommend it highly if freaking I was alone and nobody could see freaking my body butt naked.
There you go.
You know what I mean?
Go and get a porno account. You get
Well,
a porno account.
there's a difference between freaking like porno and freaking actually seeing a person, an average person, butt naked. Okay, there is nothing pretty about the human body, no matter what they say, unless it's freaking fixed up and looking good. Okay, trust me, there is nothing.
You know?
Dude, I'm just telling you, you know, freaking, especially like people are talking about going to nude beaches and stuff. You don't want to go to a nude beach. Okay, there's going to be a lot of stuff you don't want to see at a nude beach.
You know, I've been to clothing optional campsites and stuff like that, and you just have to go with the philosophy of the people there are not taking their clothes off so that you can look at them. They're taking their clothes out because they don't want to wear any clothes. So, in my experience, nobody really spends much time looking at each other anyway. I did enjoy the co-ed showers. That was pretty good. They had like segregated showers if you want to take a little walk, but no way I was walking 20 yards to take a shower with a bunch of guys. I went and showered with girls. I felt more comfortable with them.
Well, according to Bob Dub, we have been having technical issues, but it's been off and on. It's been coming back and forth. So
Ah,
the good
That's
thing
just on
is,
Rumble. That's just on Rumble.
the good thing is though is this is being recorded, so
right.
Okay.
we do have it backed up and everything. Um, I'm going to go ahead and take and bring it to an end if you guys don't have anything else you want to say. So it's up to you guys. You guys want to say something else?
I'm okay.
I'm fine also.
Yeah, I think we had a pretty good conversation too. You know, I mean, we really did. I don't care if anybody got to see it or not. Yeah, Bob Dub, poor Bob Dub. She's in chat. She should have come in here and hung out with us, and she could have listened to us in freaking chat. Like, but she said, no, I don't want to do that. I want to just sit on the chat and watch you guys on the Rumble, 'cause I'm a girl.
She had insomnia. I've had that too.
I know.
And you know it's because
Yeah.
she respects us and only wants to be talking with us when she's at her best.
Well, she didn't have to talk. She could have listened.
Well, I'm sure she's been listening.
Well,
But
I'm saying she would have heard it better if she was in here with us and
Oh,
just.
wow. She'll hear it all when it's recorded. I'm glad she was able to stay awake long enough to hear us. I thought we'd put her to sleep. I was hoping you'd be a lullaby. Nuts.
She called me fancy pants. That's why I had to say all that stuff. She said, "Oh, fancy pants, Roger, you're so just fancy pants." See, she said she hasn't heard nothing and she should have fallen asleep. I figured my voice would have done that because that's what that does to women. It just kind of knocks them out.
It's an amazing power you have.
I know it's a superpower is what it is. Like
Yeah.
I was saying that the other day, man. I was like, it's almost it's a responsibility that I have to be careful about because
Yeah.
you know, like very few people have the abilities that I have when it comes to this voice.
Mm.
So
You got a natural blues voice. You should like sing the blues. Got that voice.
if I tried to sing, I would probably have a heart attack and die of freaking
No.
terror and shit. Sitting out, and we were talking about being naked. You know, it's kind of like freaking that. You know, make me sing, and I feel like a naked dude in school. You know, in the everybody talks about that classroom dream where you sitting in class butt naked.
Yeah.
That's how I'd feel if I was actually singing. So, with that being said, I guess we could end it on that one, can't we? You guys,
Something for people to think about, yeah.
you guys freaking want to give a plug and let everybody know how they can get in touch with you.
Okay, I can be found mainly on Minds, so you have minds.com/midwifery.
Okay. How about you, Otto?
Well, basically the same thing. I am most active on minds.com, so you can find me there.
As
I'm all over the place.
as Otto Excelsior.
Auto Excelsior at minds.com.
There you go. And with me, if you guys are watching this stream, this is where you can get in touch with me. I'm also on Discord as Roger Hansen. I'm also on Minds as Roger_Hansen. And that's about as easy as I can say it. I'm not going to like do a whole breakdown on that stuff because it'll get complicated really, really quick.
Yeah.
So, with that being said, I will go ahead and end the show and thank you guys for being here and thank everybody for watching us.